Hi guys, we got Bobcat here, and I am making my first video journal since my other one, which was my proposal. Just to show you up to date where I'm at. December 1st was the first day that I actually really got my hands doing something, and trying to figure out what to do. And what I've got for you is a little bit of the planning for the Black Hand. So I printed out a picture of the Black Hand hammer right here, and there's all these notes all over the hammer, as you can see in pencil. I discovered that with the picture that I have, in comparison to the actual size, is an 8:1 ratio. Also, so every 1 inch that's on this diagram is 8 inches actual size, or 1 inch actual size is an eighth of an inch on here. And so I made very key measurements on each part of the hammer. If I angle this right, you can see the pencil marks because it's quite dark. So cuff 5/8 of an inch to the first ring 9/16, all the way along the rod. And this allowed me to select what kind of a dowel to use, because I had a few options, which I have over here. So I've got, this one is, this one's okay. The problem that I had with this one is I felt like it was too short, and it's also quite thick, so this one is not going to be used, at least not for this particular project, so that one's out of it. This was the one that I was seriously considering because it was a really nice grip on the hands. I even marked on it 30 inches, 2.5 feet. I don't even know if you can see that, but yeah, I marked it on that because I was seriously considering this one. But the problem with this one is, if you look on the diagram, the Black Hand diagram, you see that this particular rod, if I'm going with a scale that I am going with, which is 8:1, this rod would only be long enough to hit from the back of that cuff there all the way to the back end of this cuff. Or if I were to slide it down, right where the rod actually touches the head of the hammer, to back here at the other end of the cuff. And then if I center it, it would be in between the cuffs. So it'd be really pushing it if I decided to go with this rod. So I was thinking there's got to be another one that I have. And sure enough, I do have one other one that is actually a little bit longer, which is this one. Now, the problem that I had with this one originally is that it's another one of those thick handles. So the other one that I showed you earlier that also has a thick handle, it's almost the same diameter. This one is actually a little bit smaller, but it's shorter, so it doesn't work. So I was stuck trying to choose between long handle but a wider diameter, or a shorter handle with a correct diameter. Well, correct. At least correct to me. That's what I thought. But when I did the scale measurement, I discovered that the thickness of the actual handle, in terms of the scaling, actually matches this tube's diameter. So I was like, okay, it feels big around the hands, but that's okay. It does feel thick around the hands, but Black Hand himself is a big guy. His hands would be able to fit around this like I would be able to fit my hands around. Well, I don't even know where I put it now. Like I'd be able to fit my hands around this one. So I guess it works in that sense. So I wanted to have a little bit of extra space. So I get my diagram over here again. With this rod, it reaches all the way from the back end of this butt, not including the spike that's at the end, and it goes all the way up to and inside the head, which works because I actually wanted a little bit of excess inside the head. I was a little unsure if it didn't actually make it to that, like it would get bendy even with the paper mache. I wasn't sure if it would strengthen, so that's good. So I took the handle, maybe I should just call it that. We took the tube, and I took the scales, everything that I measured, all those key parts that I mentioned earlier that's marked on there, and I marked them on the tube itself so that I don't have to keep, checking back, just mark it on the tube. So hold it this way so that you can see. So I started at this end, which this part right here is going to actually be inside the hammer's head. And then the next section is going to be the head cuff, which is sort of seems to connect the actual handle to the head of the hammer. And then there's a gap, which has leather wrap around it. I'll have a picture of the actual image of the black hand above so that you can see what I'm talking about. That's this part. Then there is a ring that is about this far down. And I divide this next section into a few little bits, but I'll talk about that in a minute, because this from here all the way down to here is the actual handle part, which is going to be wrapped in the leather to be gripped with the actual hands. And then at this end, we've got I've labeled it as butt cuff, because I think that's the butt end of the hammer. I don't know what the actual terms are, but that's the terms that work for me. So when I was going through my measurements, I realized due to my scale, we were working with a 8:1. That means that even every 16th of an inch on my diagram is going to make a difference, because every 16th of an inch on this diagram is half an inch on the actual thing. I need to make sure that my measurements are accurate, because if they're not, it's going to be off. The slightest measurement, so I have to be very careful with that. And I discovered this because I was actually rounding to like the nearest quarter of an inch or something like that, and I quickly realized that I might need to remark that. But instead what I did was I made the handle part the 0. So I measured everything up to the handle from this end. Usually you would measure from one end all the way to the other. Like, always measure from this end to like here, if you know what I mean. If you know what I'm talking about, like if you hold a tape measure to figure out measurements, you'd always have the end of the tape measure on this end. You never want to go from this end, otherwise you could screw up your measurements. But what I did was, just for the butt cup itself, I did have the tape measure go from this end. So I made sure that I did this, because that way the handle would sort of have whatever length. I decided that the handle doesn't necessarily need to have a specific length, so I just made that the section that didn't necessarily need to matter. But on the handle itself, I've also made sure to add some additional notes. So if you look closely on the handle, on the actual hammer itself, there is a thick part that starts, and then it shrinks down from that thick part to the thinner part in this section right here. So I need to make sure that I get that down pat. Make sure I am literally trying to make sure that I get every possible detail of this hammer accurate, and I have displayed that on the actual tube. Oh yeah, I've got this stuff here too. So yeah, the main thing was about this rod, right? So we also have other materials here that I'll be using. We got cardboard box, and we're probably going to, I don't know if I'll necessarily be using this particular box, but I'm definitely aiming to use cardboard box card to make the handle, or not the handle, the hammer head itself. And then I've got this nice cardboard here. What's special about this card, I don't know if I'm actually going to use this particular package of the cardboard, but the cardboard type is what I'm talking about. This cardboard type is only skinned on one side, so you see it has those that rough edge that you see on the inside of cardboard, but it doesn't have the skin. One side it does, the other side it doesn't. The reason I want to use this cardboard is because it will be useful for wrapping cardboard around for like the cuff pieces of the hammer's handle, and it's just a case of layering it up, multiple layers, and if it's got some sort of a need to, you know, trim down, like especially the handle that shrinks in this section, that's when I would sort of want to shape it with a knife or something to carve around it and make sure that it looks right. It's going to look fine. The only other thing that I'm probably going to be using on this is the newspaper. I'll probably use that for the ring piece, but yeah. But this is just where I've gotten. I've told you what I've gotten right now, where I plan to go with this in extreme detail, and hopefully next time you'll actually start to see some more cardboard on this tube, and maybe even some newspaper. Who knows? Whenever I get around to this next. But for now, thank you for watching, and until I post the next video for my hammer for the Black Hand, have a good night.